Check. Check. Yeah, that seems to be working. All right. Imagine in your mind's eye right now some really funky intro music. We obviously don't have the budget for it yet, but in the future, there's going to be some cool music. I'm like imagining like banjo, some sort of banjo music.
Yeah, heavy banjo.
Yeah, like that goes into some metal.
Yeah, metal banjo. I
metal,
like the
yeah.
sound of this.
Yeah,
This is a
yeah.
good start.
Yep, and then something like the Brothers Gideon podcast. That's where we're going to get with it.
I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
we
we
just
need-
got to find that right banjo player out there.
Yep. I mean, at the moment we have 0 listeners, so
That's all right.
once we have 5 or 6, we'll think about doing an intro. All right, hello and welcome to the Brothers Gideon podcast, the show on how to create more prepared, more resilient, and more responsible human beings. My name is Stuart, aka Gads the Younger, and with me is Dr. Anthony Gideon, aka Gads the Elder, Gads Senior, Brother Dusk,
Very good.
Old Man Gads. Anything else? Have I forgotten anything? Or?
I'm sure there's a few more, but
Dr.
usually they're
Gads.
not told to my face.
Right, yeah. In today's episode, which is the inaugural episode, this is our very first one, we're going to just give you a bit of an intro, what this podcast is about, why we're doing it, and probably more importantly, who we are. Why would you listen to us?
Indeed.
Why would anyone listen to us?
I don't know, but apparently some people do.
Mm-hmm.
And now we're finding a way to get it out there more, to talk to more people, get more listeners, get more feedback, and just continue with what we do every day anyway, just in a broader forum.
Well, before we jump into who we are as individuals, our backgrounds, how we got to doing what we're doing now, maybe we'll just give a quick, a couple of words on what it is this podcast is actually about, who it's aimed for, what we're trying to get across here, what we're trying to do with it. In my mind, at least, it's all the things that I find cool.
Yeah.
Well, not all of it. I mean, yes, most of the things I find
I
cool.
think most of them, yeah.
Yeah. Stuff that we've done in our
Yeah.
past,
Yep.
the experiences that we had, which I think differ from a lot of other people.
It gives us a different point of view, for sure.
Yep. But a lot of it's just like, we like hunting, so let's talk about how to hunt better.
Yeah.
I like being prepared for emergencies and the end of the world, so we'll chat about that. You love plugging holes in people. That sounded bad. It's not a pornographic thing, it's a doctor thing, right?
I think making sure the holes don't leak.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
That's probably the way to put it.
But just general how we look after ourselves, medicine, how we prepare ourselves for the situations that are a little bit extraordinary that we don't see every day. I think that's something that we'd like to do. Leads into how do we manage these situations, both here and every day and around the world. In disaster, so-called disasters, what does a disaster mean? And just creating that generalised, what we call global and situational awareness that we've both attained over our time and on our travels, and now we'll share some of that knowledge with everyone else out there.
I think for me, like, the question always in my head is, how do human beings survive? How does anything survive? How do we get to the point where we are? And whenever I say survival, I think a lot of people conjure up this idea, and I've been in this world before, where you go out into the wilderness and you make fire by friction and you build shelters and things like that. And that is a section of survival. It's a very important section, but there is an entire gamut. Like, we still actually have to survive a lot of things in our world here. I mean, here in Australia, it's not too bad. It's pretty easy.
Well, we'll still have to survive getting up for breakfast, surviving the traffic, surviving the train, the trams.
That's true.
Everywhere we need to travel. There's still a lot of things we do actually survive on a daily basis that is actually quite dangerous if we're not aware of it.
True. And every now and then, we're thrust into emergency situations. A guy walks in with a gun to a cafe that we're sitting at. A crazy person walks in with a knife to a mall that we're shopping at. So, like, the need to survive, I think, is still there. It's just suppressed a lot.
Indeed. I mean, I think the best example I've ever seen of understanding what survival means is back in the day when I was in the forces, we did a survival course in Papua New Guinea, up in the highlands there. We saw the locals up there, and they taught us how to do those things that we think of as survival, like make fire, catch food, hunt. And then it triggered to me that that is what they do every day. It's like we go shopping down the street, we fill up our car with fuel. They're ordinary things that they do, and they just see that as an everyday part of life. And we can apply those exact same principles that they use for survival out in the jungle that we can apply right here in everyday life.
So a key point for actually being a Western survival trainer is an Instagram account. If you don't have that Instagram account, like,
You're just lost to the world.
do you even survive? Like,
Do you exist?
all right, you mentioned there, you alluded to, it was, a bit of a foreshadowing, if you will, that you had experience in the forces. Use the force, Luke.
Indeed.
So let's use that as a little segue to jump into your background. Tell the viewers or the listeners out there how you became Dr. Gatz.
Sure. It's a long road, and I did not start very early. So I actually joined the Australian Defence Force at a young age, 17. Hadn't finished school, didn't know what to do. Friends around me getting in trouble, I found a way out of it, and I found my way into the Army. Army saved me. I found I had a good affiliation to the Army and took to those skills and took that lifestyle really well. Started off in our long gone parachute battalion that we no longer have anymore, and made my way to the Special Forces, where I stayed in the Australian SAS over in Western Australia for quite a number of years, doing up to 20 years in this Army in total before I got out to study medicine. Now, it was an exciting time to be in the Army in general and to be in the Special Forces. We were going overseas like never before. We're seeing deployments after deployments in combat zones, and it was very active and actually quite enticing and hard to get out of. But it was during that time that brought me to my experiences overseas, doing things like remote area medical clinics where we were helping locals in remote parts of Timor and Afghanistan on hearts and minds operations. And then later, when we started getting into gunfights in Afghanistan, learning how to plug holes and treat people in major trauma situations. These are the things that brought me into the idea of medicine. Now, I knew 20 years down the track, your body doesn't hold up, and I was quite fortunate to actually be keeping going for that long, because I know a lot of friends that had never made it that far. So I made a plan. I got out, went to the paramedics in Western Australia, stayed there for a couple of years, and then sort of realised I wanted to do more and ended up in medicine. Studied medicine at school, and now I term myself a generalist. I learn a little bits of medicine here and there. I like the broad category of it, where I can apply my medicine to all different ranges of situations and places that I have been able to utilise in the world. There are more stories to this, but I'll let you go at that and pass you over to Stu and let him tell you a little bit about himself and how he arrived here with me today.
Yes, my story isn't as long because I'm not as long in the tooth.
Not as old?
Not as old, yeah. I was trying to be...
Not as many white or grey hairs in the beard. Yes, we've noticed this.
I've had a softer existence, okay. No, I also joined the army, but not quite at the tender age of 17. I waited till I was 21 to do it, so I went and studied. Just to give people a bit of background, us growing up as kids. Now, Anthony was, how would I describe you? You were born into the army, I think. You were made for it. Always out in the bush, scouts, camping. You loved it, and I followed in the footsteps a little bit. So,
Given we grew up in the foothills of the Dandenong Ranges, so it wasn't hard at all to be forever up in those hills doing something for long lengths of time.
Yep.
And as long as you weren't home too far after dark, you usually did get in trouble.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about the 80s here, and 80s and then sort of 90s for me, still growing up. So you could get away with not being there
Yeah,
until like dinner was ready.
that was the call. If you had to be there for the dinner bell,
Yep.
any later you're in trouble, but before then, it's all your own time.
Apart from that, we were left to our own devices. We could do whatever we want. And quite often you did, as I recall, and dragged me along into it.
Yeah, yeah.
I recall jumping off roofs onto trampolines and then up from the trampoline into a tree and having to grab onto the tree.
Got to learn to fly somehow.
Yeah, or broken leg.
Well,
That's the choice. It was good times. I remember setting up a pole or a target range in our backyard, and we had weapons.
We did.
Growing up.
Yeah, yeah.
There was a crossbow, there was axes, there was shuriken, throwing stars, there was throwing knives.
Yeah.
There was a lot of stuff that we had there. My daughter's looking through the studio window right now, going, "What are you guys doing?" Hey. Right. So and martial arts. We also did martial arts growing up. So that was a big part of especially your life. But I followed you into that as well. Followed you into Scouts. Then I went and did something totally different to you. I went and studied in the arts, not the liberal arts, the actual arts, like graphic design arts. So I studied graphic design for a number of years, then decided that wasn't for me, joined the military, went straight into the special operations community in the Commandos, which, for those who don't know, you've got the SAS in Australia, which is the older, more distinguished, more polished, more, what would you call it? Mature unit of special forces or special operations, let's say, in the Australian military. And then you've got the young upstarts, the Commandos, the younger brother, if you will. So kind of fitting that both of us should go those two ways.
Very well.
Yeah. And just to give you a bit of a heads up for those who don't know why you'd have two units like this, the SAS I would often describe as an elite unit that is scalpel-like in its precision. You needed something done, you needed somebody looked at, you needed information collected, you needed something struck with absolute precision, you would send the SAS. But if you needed walls smashed in, if you needed a blunt object, if you needed a village leveled, you send the Commandos. So that should kind of fill in a bit of like the personality, I think, between us two.
Indeed.
All right, so yeah, I joined the military, was in the Commandos. I was only in for 6 years, 6 very busy years. Then got out and studied sports and exercise science, and then became a trainer as well.
A trainer for a while.
Yeah, did that for a number of years. So fitness is something that's quite big in both of our lives, but I certainly nerd out on it a little bit. Human movement, definitely. And then got back into the private sector, so have kind of worked in and around that space for a while. So I've been teaching people in this kind of sphere, teaching governments, teaching media crews and journalists and things like this for the past decade and a bit.
And anyone else that'll listen.
Anyone that listens, yeah. Quite often getting on the internet and just like blabbing at a screen. And people listen. I don't know why. I haven't figured it out yet, but people listen. So that's kind of my rough background. Yeah. I think that brings us kind of up to today.
Pretty close, yeah. So there might be a few adjunct stories we can add in later in other episodes, but I think that gives us a good start, a good grounding for everyone to know where we're from, where we're at, and what our point of view is on these subjects. So we have a quite a great deal more experience and exposure to these kind of things that we want to talk about that we mentioned earlier, and bring to you that experience, that exposure, that you don't actually have to go and live the life, but you can gain the distilled essence of what we've learned over our many years.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the experiences that we've been exposed to so much over the past decades is going into places that have, I use the term collapsed in some way, have fallen into conflict, have, the economy's crashed, or someone's taken over, or there's some sort of natural disaster that's happened, earthquake zones and fires and floods and all these sorts of things. These are the kinds of places that I would almost say routinely go into. and have to exist in. So we're pretty well aware of what happens in emergencies, in disasters. And one thing that I've learnt from the years of going in there is that there's not actually that much that separates our world that we live in to that zone there. That can happen anywhere on the face of the earth. And if we don't prepare for that kind of eventuality, then I've seen what happens when people don't prepare for it. They do not fare well.
Absolutely. I think as you said, we're only a couple of degrees away from something like that happening. Now that's not to be over foreboding or over paranoid about it, but just the knowledge that those things can happen quite easily to even people as well set up in society in our Western society as structured as it is. Disasters can happen and they can be quite devastating when they do happen.
Yes, absolutely. One of the things I think I want to try and do with this podcast of what we're doing here and getting this information out is you touched on a word there, paranoia, and I often use the joke that like you need to be the right level of paranoid in the world. That's my perspective, right, of reality. But it is just a joke. I don't think people need to be paranoid at all. What I'm actually trying to achieve, in my head at least, is that we're not saying, hey, the world's a bad place and you need to freak out. We're showing you that, yes, things can happen in the world, but the idea of this is that we're trying to share information and empower people to take on the skills, take on the knowledge that's going to be required to survive in those situations. So to replace what might be that paranoia, to replace what might be fear about these things that can happen with some sort of confidence, I guess, that hey, actually human beings, we have survived as a species in the current form that we're in, depending on who you listen to on this, but hundreds of thousands of years or further back than that we have all the tools that we need. We have all the technology built into us. All that survival technology has evolved within us. It's just really dulled and turned down in our society because we don't need to use it a lot.
Yeah, and I totally agree. I think humans as a race have enormous potential, and I think just understanding that potential at the end of the day. And look, these things aren't when necessarily things go absolutely wrong or to mud. They can help you just in everyday life, how to navigate these problems before they become problems and get around them and continue on with your life as normal with minimal impact. That's sort of where we're getting to, I think, with our podcast as well. Not just the worst end scenario, but that everyday lessons that you can learn and use.
It's the kind of podcast I'd want to listen to.
Me too, definitely.
Yeah. Well, I think that kind of sums up what we're trying to do here. So we might kick this one into touch, which for those who have never played rugby before, that's a term for finishing off the game. We'll finish this one. Is there anything else you wanted to throw in there?
I'll just say to everyone, we want to hear about what you want to hear. You know our background now. You know what we've got to offer. I want to hear the specific podcasts from here on out, what you would like to know about, and we'll see what we can do to arrange it.
I'm getting all the usual things together. So there'll be like an Instagram account and a YouTube channel and a Rumble channel and etc. So feel free to reach out if you have any questions or comments on this. Also, you can get a hold of us on the email if you're so inclined. That email is TGB. I got it.
Great.
The brothers Gaden. No, TBG. TBG.
Yeah.
I knew I'd get there in the end. All right, it's an acronym, and I'm not so good at it. Perhaps like undiagnosed dyslexia. That's what I'm starting to think, or early onset senility.
Mum did say you were special.
Yeah, that's that's for sure. The brothers getting right. TBG podcast at proton.me. That's the email address if you want to shoot us a question or a comment or tell us that you don't like the cut of our jib. You can put it in there. I'll duly ignore that, but feel free to do so. If you're that kind of person who like to sit and their mother's basement and tap out messages to people on the internet that you've never met before. I don't care. Do it. Sure. Fill your time with that. Not my problem, really, but yeah, how about you? Right.
Look forward to having a chat with you all next time.
Yeah, and I'll work on getting a funky musical intro for this.
Awesome.
All right. Take care.
See ya.